Okay, we have Chuck Merdler,
Yep.
Marty Wolpoff, Rosemary Ginty, Dan Paternock.
Rosemary and a couple of other people who are critical, in my view, to a couple of issues are going to arrive around 7:30. So I will
Okay.
take the agenda to accommodate that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sounds good. So,
Okay,
Marty,
Can you
Yeah.
wipe it out? No.
can
it's
you
not.
please mute yourself, sir? Okay, sorry, Chuck, Marty, Rosemary's not here yet. Ken,
Here, present.
Sylvia, Bob Bender,
Here.
Nick Fazio,
No, you can do it with or without audio. So it just says Garth
um,
without, yeah. Like Eric Dinowitz is on there, but he's not showing
I don't
either.
know who that is.
But
Can you
see
mute
on your
yourself,
phone.
please?
But I promise I'm here.
All right. David Gelman,
Present.
Julie Reyes.
Present.
Okay, all right, Chuck, we have a quorum.
All right. As I said a few moments ago, several people who I believe will play an important part in portions of the discussion, particularly insofar as they relate to the affordable housing point, are going to be a few moments late. And also they have input on the visitation issue, which will be essentially by way of report. So let me see if I can jump ahead to see if people are present on a given issue. Is there anyone here present on the BSA application 651-60BZ 600 West 246th Street?
Yes, Mr. Murther. Hi, Jim Power from Kramer 11.
Okay, hang on, I'll get to you in a minute. David Gelman's here, isn't he? Did I see Gelman before?
Yes, David is here,
Okay,
or he was.
and is somebody here from 215 West Kingsbridge Road? All right, we'll get back to you. I'm moving some of these items around, so for the reasons I told you earlier. On the BSA application, Mr. Power, is your application ripe yet for review by the board, or has it not yet been docketed, or what?
Yes, it was it's been filed and it's under review, and we hope to be scheduled for a hearing sometime in the coming months. We haven't been scheduled for a hearing yet, but we hope to be scheduled soon.
Because I have conflicting information. I understood from your colleague and partner that it would be better that we defer the hearing until the other, or are you prepared to go forward with your presentation today?
We are prepared to go forward. I believe he was referring to an application, a different application, and not the one that we're discussing.
Okay,
Yes.
so what is this application then?
Well, I'll first introduce, I'm Jim Power from Kramer 11, Land Use Council to Glenwood Management, and I'm joined, I think, by Kristen Ivers. Are you here, Kristen?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, yes. And Kristen is a management supervisor for Glenwood Management. This application concerns the Briar Hill rental building at 600 West 246th Street between Henry Hudson Parkway and Independence Avenue. The application seeks an extension of the term of a variance originally approved by the BSA in 1961 under the pre-1961 zoning resolution. The original variance allowed use of a portion of the cellar area to be used as an accessory valet service. And then in 1994, the variance was amended to allow an additional area to be used as a stationary store.
Let me stop you. Ms. Kristen, what role does Glenwood play?
We're the management company. We manage the building of where the commercial space is located.
I am therefore required by the Conflict of Interest Board to make the following disclosure. Members of my firm, but not I, have represented Lenny Litwin and Glenwood over the period of more years than anybody can care to remember. Indeed, one of our former colleagues and partners is a senior officer of Glenwood. That does not disqualify me because I do not play any role in connection therewith, but I have made the requisite disclosure. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ms. Powell.
Yes, so we have I have a PowerPoint presentation I can walk you through just to explain the variance a little bit better. Kira, could I have?
I made you co-host, James.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm gonna, let me see how I, where did this here? Oh, share screen, okay. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, so I'll just walk you through the location. The site here in the middle is the Briar Hill Residential Complex. It consists of two buildings. The variance space that we're discussing is located in the northeastern building, close to West 246th Street. This is an actual floor plan of the cellar level of that building. And it shows that the area in pink is not relevant to this application. It was previously surrendered. The two areas that we're talking about are in blue. There's a valet office, a 7-foot wide by 32-foot deep area, accessible only from the interior of the building, located at the end of a long corridor. And then there's a slightly larger stationary store in this location that has a small entrance from the outside. These are some more detailed floor plans. You can see the entrance to the stationary store here. These are some photos of the interior of the two spaces. Both spaces have been vacant for some time, and Glenwood has been seeking appropriate tenants for the spaces. And this is a photo of the outside of the building. This is the main entrance to the building here. To get to the valet service, you'd go in the main entrance, go all the way down a long corridor to the space. It's actually only accessible and usable by tenants of the building. And then the stationary store is accessible by a small door, which is very inconspicuous and I think hidden in this photo by the tree in front.
You skipped over that slide, number 7.
Oh, sure, number 7. This one here,
Okay.
yeah, yes.
Is that stationary store still functioning?
No, it's been
No.
vacant for some time. Both spaces have been vacant for a long time.
Is that the place that used to print invitations and the like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, the variance was originally approved in 1961. It's been extended several times, each time with the support of Community Board 8, including unanimously in 2017. We're now requesting an additional extension so that Glenwood can continue to provide the amenity to its tenants, many of whom are elderly and had come to rely on the in-house valet service. And the building is otherwise occupied in compliance with the prior approvals. I would also note the prior term expired in March of 2021, so we are seeking a waiver of the BSA's rules to allow us to apply for the extension more than 30 days after expiration. We've discussed that request with BSA staff, and they believe it's appropriate in light of the COVID pandemic and the efforts that Glenwood's been making to find new tenants. So as I mentioned, the board has supported extensions of this application in the past, and we would request your support again tonight.
You've lost me on one point.
Yes,
You're seeking an extension of variance. I take it to rent the premises. Is that correct?
yes,
And the rental in some way involves valet services. Is that correct?
Yes.
one of the two spaces is valet space, yes.
And is that space that you are currently using for valet purposes, hope to use for valet purposes, or what?
Hope to use, yeah.
Yeah, we had previously occupied it as such for 50-something years. It is now currently vacant as of last December, and Glenwood has been seeking a new tenant to occupy it.
So these are applications so that you could utilize the premises for the desired purpose, but do not yet have a tenant for either. And I'm curious as to why you're targeting it for just those two uses when you don't have a tenant yet.
Well, the valet service has always been purely about providing an amenity to the tenants in the building. And that's really the entire purpose of it. And I would say also, Glenwood has offered the space at free rent in an attempt to find an appropriate valet operator, and has still had difficulty. So it's really it's not about generating revenue, it's about providing an amenity to the tenant. The stationery store was a historical use. I think Kristen, was there a tenant in the building who wanted to have some space for his own business? And
Yes,
and he also at some point decided he no longer wanted to occupy it. So we would hope to find an appropriate tenant for that space also.
Anything else, Mr. Powell?
No, I don't think so.
David?
Yeah, I get the valet. I don't have a problem with that. I don't understand the stationery store whatsoever. It looks like a super's apartment, with stove and sink and refrigerator, and it would be the only retail space west of the Henry Hudson. I'm just really sort of puzzled. I don't get the stationery store. What uses could it have under the law?
Well, under the BSA approval, it is limited to stationery store use. There was at one point an approval in place to allow some of this space to be used as a dry goods store. But I think that in order to change the use from stationery to something else, we would probably need to go back to BSA for some kind of an amendment to the approval, which hopefully.
So its only use would be for selling paper and pencils?
At this point in time, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Marty?
Yes, you seem to have answered my question. I mean, I have been in that store, David, so I know what they don't sell pencils and paper. They do printing,
Right.
invitations. I think that's what it was called, Invitation Plus. The question I have is, if you don't have a tenant and you've been searching for a tenant, and you just said you have to go back to BSA to change its use, were that to happen, do you have to come back to us if you got a tenant who wanted to do something else?
That would depend on what the BSA says about our request for modification at that time. There are some situations where they say, well, you're only changing from one innocuous use to another, and we'll approve that by what they refer to as a letter of substantial compliance. In other situations, they say it's a substantial change.
Let me be perfectly clear about this. I would expect, before I put this to a vote, to have your understanding and commitment, you will come back to this board in the event you seek change of use before that happens.
I think we can make that agreement, and we would, yes, even if the BSA said they would approve it by letter, we would agree to come back and present it to your board.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
Dan?
Hi, Mr. Power. I was just wondering, how long does this, I guess the variance last, the permit variance last? Like, I don't remember when you guys were last here to see us, and I guess when the next time you would have to come see us is.
Yes, ordinarily the extensions are for 10-year terms. It was last approved in 2017. It expired in 2021. So the ordinary term would be through 2031.
So
2031.
I guess I'm confused there. Is it 10 or 4 years? Like, why 4 years now?
The extensions are ordinary 10 years, but usually retroactive to the last expiration date. So I think in 2017, there had been an earlier expiration as well. And so the 2017 approval was for a 10-year period that only ran until 2021. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. It does. It sounds like you guys expired in 2011, I guess.
2011, correct, yes.
But you were in 17 because nobody renewed it. Now you're back here in 21, and this will take you, I'm sorry, you're in 22, but 21 will take you through 2031 if this gets granted.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? On the motion to approve on condition, the condition being that should it vary for a use other than a stationary or comparable use, they will come back to the board before seeking approval. Do I have a second?
Second,
Any discussion? All those in favor? Please. Well, let me put it the other way around. Is there any member of the Land Use Committee who is opposed to this grant on condition? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. I thank you, Mr. Powers.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening. I know.
Kristen, do you know Nancy Albertson?
Yes, I do.
Tell her I said hello, please.
I will. I
Her
will.
husband, she and her husband are old friends.
I will. I'll definitely let her know.
I'm going to take one other one before the 7:30 arrival. Item number 6, the proposed development update on 215 West Kingsbridge Road and 229. Is the applicant here, or is the individual who is the real estate broker here?
There is no real estate brokers over here, nor, my name is Jakob Sarek. I'm from Node Architecture and Engineering. And yes, the developer had asked me to attend this meeting. I'm not quite sure the meaning of the meeting because I'm not aware that he had applied for any variance or any sort of.
So let me tell you why we have a meeting. And is Mr. Jurek coming or not coming?
No, he is not coming.
I see. All right, that is not a good sign. Let me tell you that a member of this community has gone to others in the building that is been erected. I believe, stop me, Kira, if I am wrong, it was 215, am I right?
215, there is on 215 and 225, there is ongoing earthwork at the moment.
All right, then it's going to be 235, right?
I am not associated with 235, so I
And
cannot
And,
talk
and
about.
you're not qualified to address it, but you should take a message back to your client.
Sure.
There has been a report that a proposed management agreement or a proposed leasing is to go to a shelter outfit that has been widely criticized by the city of New York and published in the New York Times as being something less than salutary. I want to know why. I want to know the terms, and I would like to have Mr. Jurek here, which is why we invited him. This is the second time he hasn't come. So let me make this clear. He will be here December 7th, or I will go after his real estate license. You understand that? And why will I do it? Because in order to be a qualified real estate broker and manager, you're required to meet a standard of credibility and integrity. And based on what I read in the New York Times, the proposed tenant here is something less than salutary. Now, we've twice invited him to come by, and he has chosen not to. We've had one complaint after another concerning that building. And that's not the kind of an attitude if you want to be a licensed broker or agent. So please tell him, to put it mildly, I'm ticked off. That doesn't mean my colleagues are, but I am.
I duly noted, Mr. Mordler. Is there any questions that I can answer regarding the 225 and 215 developments?
Yes, could you tell us where those are?
Those are the multifamily developments. The 225 West Kingsbridge is 37 units, 7-story building, and 215 is the 23 units, 6-story development. They are all multifamily as of right buildings that are qualified for 30% affordable housing to qualify for 421As. So pretty common type of developments.
What are you proposing in terms of an apartment mix in each of those buildings?
These are going to be 1, 2, and 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and studio apartments.
What's the mix? How many studio, how many one, how many?
There is going, let me just open my document over here and I'm going to tell you straight up. Okay, so what we have, it's going to be, okay, so we have 1 bedroom, 1 bedroom, 1 bedroom, and 2 bedrooms. So it's going to be a on 2, this is 215. Yes, so we're gonna have floors 4 to 6. We're gonna have 3 1 bedrooms and 1 2 bedroom per floor. So that is, I would say, there is no studios in this building. So out of 23 units, you are looking at 6 2 bedrooms, and you are looking at, you know, remaining units being 1 bedroom units. So the other development on the 225 West Kingsbridge, what we have is we have 1 1 1 1. They are actually all 1 bedroom units.
Okay. What is the eligible income level of affordability that you propose here?
I am not the 421A consultant, but these are
What
the
21A is gone.
I understand, but this is not affordable or inclusionary building, so it is qualified under 421A. So the AMIs are probably at 130%. But don't quote me, please, because that's not my part of the job here.
I understand. Would you do this for me?
Absolutely.
Would you please get to the board district office tomorrow the information as to what the affordable income levels are that you are proposing to rent at? Those who stay tuned for Ted Weinstein's presentation will understand that that is a critical element.
No problem, sir.
All right. Okay, please do tell Mr. Jurek that this is, it really is essential. We understand what's going on here.
Noted.
There's no objection that I am aware of to the concept of having housing for the homeless. They need it. Everybody's entitled to shelter. But it is time that we had in this city a program that made sure that those who were licensed to operate it were reputable and conducted themselves appropriately. So if you will follow up on that and tell him, I would appreciate it, frankly, if he would get hold of me by phone either tomorrow or Thursday, and he can get my number from the community board office.
I'll do my best, sir.
Thank you very much. One more question.
Yes.
JR.
Yeah, hi,
JR.
Chuck. Hi, Chuck. I just had a question. He mentioned in 215 West Kingsbridge that from floors 4 to 6, there will be 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms. What's on floors 1 to 3?
No problem. Let me just pull it up and I'll let you know. So the floors 1 to 3, first floor is the residential lobby. And then we have the driveway and the parking in the rear. So we have here proposed 12 parking spaces at the first floor. So pretty much all of the first floor is occupied by parking and residential lobby. The second floor and third floor, we have 2 studios and 3 1-bedroom apartments.
I thought you said a minute ago there were no studios.
No studios on floors 4 to 6. There are 2 studios. Actually, out of 23 units, there are 4 studios.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me give you a quick report on an issue. It's a report only. And I would have gotten it to you in writing, except that the conversations happened within the past 2 hours. As you know, there has been a fair amount of discussion, controversy, call it what you will, respecting the proposed construction on the visitation site. There have been issues raised through Bob Fanuzzi, the former chairman of the Environmental Sanitation Committee, and Tina Argenti, who's been focusing on water issues. And out of the Traffic and Transportation Committee, which Dan Paternak used to chair, and where he and the current chair met with the developers. The points I'm going to make to you are the following. The School Construction Authority, which will operate, says it, one side of the Pentagon-like structure on the site, or proposed on the site, has declined to appear and fill us in and answer questions from the community and from us. And we are doing what we can to help refresh their recollection that they are a state agency that has an obligation to taxpayers. And so we're going to continue to apply that kind of pressure, which I believe Councilman Dinowitz and Assemblyman Dinowitz have been increasingly applying in terms as they approach the budget season. SCA also needs a budget for its staff. So that's one end of it. The other end is both Assemblyman Dinowitz and Councilman Member Dinowitz have been speaking, I am told, with Gary Rodney, the former chair of, or president of the Housing Development Corporation, and currently an officer of Tishman Speyer, which is proposing to erect affordable housing on the site. They have made at least 2 points, the ones that have been communicated to me today by Mr. Rodney. One, there is concern on their part as to density and its impact on the neighborhood, and in terms of the mix of apartments. As currently, the contemplation was 25% of those were going to be studios. I am advised that those issues are being looked at all over again. We were looked at again this afternoon at meetings, and that we will be getting some further information on what that mix will be in the near future. And consistent with the suggestions of Messrs. Dinowitz, there are thoughts being given as to whether or not there can be some consolidation of the units there, which would provide for larger apartments, of course. The other aspect of this is that I have made clear that we need to start getting some real hard information. What we received for the last meeting hardly told us anything, where the entrance was, what the FAR was, how it was being used, et cetera, stuff we see at every other application. I'm told that too is being looked at. So I have suggested that if that stuff can be ready by November meeting or the December meeting, we'd like to get together with them again, whether SCA is present or not, although I'd love to see SCA there with them, because I don't like being dealt with like a salami about to be cut up to suit whoever's common needs. But again, Assemblyman Dinowitz, who I think his staff is on the phone now, and Councilman Dinowitz have also started to inquire and pressure this area so that we can get the kind of attention that the neighbors in the community have asked for. Lastly, by way of report, I have suggested that either a special board meeting be convened or a meeting of the committee as a whole, which land use used to be, but is no longer, to have the entire board be in a position to review each and every aspect, so we get the benefit at one time of the issues that are sanitation, the issues that are water, the issues that range across the board, and even indeed, quite possibly issues involving parks down the road. And I see the hand up from the representative from Assemblyman Dinowitz.
Yeah, if I may, just a brief update on our discussions with the SCA. Not going to go into all the details, but just to sort of summarize, it's my understanding that were the board to request SCA come back before the designs are finalized, that would be much more amenable than the previous requests that have been submitted. So I'll just leave it there. It sounds like they are willing to leave the door open for input on design. I think they're sort of just starting that process now. So I'll just throw that out there for the committee to take under advisement.
Let me just make a personal point. There are those who believe that it is entirely accurate that we are merely an advisory body, and we are by law. However, when you have elected representatives who work for the people of the community, who do what the community needs and what they ask for, as we have in the two message Inuits, there's much more than an advisory role that can be played. And what you just heard is a typical example.
No, that's okay. That doesn't matter. Okay.
Chuck, just a point of information. I couldn't hear Ned. Did he say before designs were finalized? I didn't hear the word in between.
Yes, but they're willing to come back. I can't speak for them. It is my understanding that if the board were to request that SCA come back before designs are finalized, that they would be amenable to such a request. I obviously can't speak for them, but that is what my understanding has been made to be.
Thanks.
All right,
Now,
Marty.
I have the phone on.
Just as a point of information, it was offered to the board many times. Under the new law, anyone who is part of the quorum must be visible at all times and can't throw up their names. And anyone who participates must be visible, can't show up their names. Gotta be a real person behind it. That's it.
Thank you.
Chuck, can I just say
Yes,
something on this
okay.
topic?
Yes, Dan.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it's a great idea, Chuck, of what you're saying as far as having a meeting of both SCA and Tishman. I think the public, the board meeting idea, I think that's spectacular as well, given the amount of issues that are here. I would suggest, even if it is a board meeting, that we offer our date of November 7th of the land use meeting for that board meeting, if that should happen. I know we do have difficulty with dates sometimes. But again, thank you for your work on that. I think it's a great idea to have that. And obviously the sooner the better. I know December we get into holidays and the like, and that becomes tricky for folks.
I will communicate with the chair to see what the dates are with Kira, to see how we can do it. This is a sufficiently critical issue that I would offer up the November 7th scheduled land use meeting date, as you suggest. But we got to get them both in here.
Yeah.
I think we've been blindsided long enough. All right. Okay, so now I can return to the agenda. The agenda calls for item number 3, a discussion of affordable housing. And let me tell you, if I may, two things. One, depending on how far we go in developing of the facts so that the people on the board, particularly people on land use, and of course, members of the board, as well as the public at large, understand better what the issues are in affordable housing and what affordable housing is, because there are very, very few people who really know what affordable housing is. And once we get moving into that direction, I am going to present and send you in advance, well in advance, a resolution to provide some clarity in this area and some method of getting that information to the public. So let me tell you why I say that before I introduce Ted Weinstein. If you make, and there are people, including public officials in the city, $250,000, you are entitled to affordable housing. You're entitled to affordable housing, which is equivalent to 165% of the AMI, the average median income in this area or the city as a whole. The issue of affordable, there are, as I read it, thanks to Ted Weinstein, basically 4 income categories of affordable housing, geared to 4 different categories of income. And all of them are called affordable housing. Now, the expert in this area is Ted Weinstein, and I've asked Ted to join us and to tell us exactly what is affordable housing, how is it determined, and then how is it enforced that that's the rent they're going to charge for that apartment. Ted.
Thank you, Chuck. I don't know if I'm an expert, but I do deal with this all the time. I guess I appreciate praise as much as the next guy, but I'm sure there are people here who know as much as I do. Let me just cover a few sentences of background and how we get to the point of looking at these numbers. Obviously, HPD and HDC, as our sister agency, have a number of different programs which provide financing for development of affordable housing. That has been something the government has, through various ways, tax incentives and others, provided financing for over a century. In a perfect world, if somebody wanted to build housing, they would just, unless they have money in their pocket, they could just go to a bank and get a loan. Unfortunately, the cost of land, cost of construction are too expensive. And so that's why the city and state and federal government have various programs that can provide subsidy to construction and keep them affordable. We have a variety of programs. I think I had sent like the cover. I strongly encourage everybody to look at our website. Our website has a ton of information, but one of them is just a list of all of our programs. And then
Can I interrupt a minute?
Sure.
There has been circulated to each member of the committee a print copy of that, the link so that they can pull that up. If there is any member of the community or of the board who is not a member of the committee who wants to see either of the two documents that you forwarded, just call Kira and she'll give you the link.
Good,
All right.
good. So we have a number of different programs that provide financing for new construction, which is, I guess, what we're mostly talking about. We also have programs for preservation of existing, but I think we're talking mostly about new construction. And the idea is to provide affordable housing. And affordable is basically defined as something is affordable if you're not paying more than 30% of your income for rent, for shelter. Sometimes they use 1/3, 33%, but usually it's 30%. So the numbers that are seen are based on that as far as the rent levels. The income levels, and everybody talks about the AMI, the area median income, and what is and what is it and what isn't it. These are numbers that are established every year, starting with the federal government. There are then some working of the numbers at local levels all over the country. But what they say is what is the area median income, the median itself, which is defined as the 100%. So if you look at a chart that shows where the numbers are according to households, family size, the 100% is the median. And then it talks about percentages of that. So if you want to go down, then you talk about 90% of AMI, 80% down to 30% of AMI. You can also go up from 100 to 110, 120. Chuck mentioned before 165 as the highest amount. Now, we have different programs, and the different programs provide financing as well as tax incentives for different levels. Basically, what happens for many years now is that when someone comes to the city, to HPD and HDC, asking for financing, they have in mind what they want. They have in mind what rents they think they want to charge, and that they can charge, what the market is for the area, what income do they need to make the building work, to make the project work. That's an important point, by the way, because it's not just a matter of the amounts, it's what the income is that is enough to run the building, to operate and maintain the building. From going back several years, many years, the numbers were fairly stable and constant as far as the programs were concerned. But the policy decision was made that it's better to have, better for society, frankly, to have a mixture, to have a range. And so the common practice for several years now has been that when we provide financing for somebody to build a building, there's a range of incomes usually within that building. I would say in most of the Bronx where we do our work, let's say it runs from about 30% of the AMI to about 80% of the AMI, maybe 100%. I will say, as a matter of policy, for the last few years now, even though the chart goes up to 165%, we don't subsidize units above 120. The feeling is that if you're making more than 120% of the area median income, then you really don't need as much of an assistance as subsidizing the construction of the building would allow. And so in certain areas, if the market is felt that it allows it, we might go up 120%, but there's always a mixture. Again, there could be some units at 30, some at 50, some at 70, some at 100. It all depends. And the bottom line, of course, is the bottom line figuratively is the bottom line literally. Everybody who wants financing from us has to provide budgets, not just the construction budget, but the operating budget as well. And it can't show a deficit. And so that starts off, that decides in the developer's mind what levels he or she wants. Again, it depends on the area. 10 years, 15 years ago, almost everything that we did, that we financed, every new building, rather that was every new building that was being proposed, particularly in the Southwest Bronx, was through our programs. Now, a lot of developers are doing buildings without subsidy from us. They may still be using tax incentives, but they're not getting construction subsidy. And of course, still some are. So we often hear people complain about the use of the AMI, that it's not appropriate. It's not just the neighborhood. It's not the median income for the Bronx. It's not the median income for the neighborhood, or even for just the city. It includes other parts of the state outside the city as well. But that would be a problem if we only used 100%, if we only use the AMI as a, and by the way, the whole point of this, of course, is income eligibility. If you're going to apply to move into one of the new buildings, you have to have an income no higher than the AMI for those apartments. But we don't use the AMI itself as the threshold. We use percentages of that. And so what may happen is you may get, let's say somebody's proposing a building of 100 units. He might be proposing 20 units at 30%, say 20 units at 50%, 20 at 70%, maybe another 10 or so at 80 and 90%. The combination of that. And then of course he figures out what kind of income does that produce that will then allow them to run the building and then pay off whatever mortgages they may have. What the chart shows again is the maximum incomes by family size. We generally, when we talk about family of three. So for example, family of three, the current AMI for the New York area is 120,100. And so when somebody wants to use financing from us, they may come in and they say, okay, we don't think we can get that though, the rent that would go with that, because then you look at the other chart and for let's say a 2-bedroom at 100%, the rent would probably be about 3,000. And so they may say, well, at that location, we can't get 3,000. And so they won't want to have units where eligibility is 100%. They may only want to be at 80%. And again, like I said, we always encourage the range because we can encourage mixed income buildings. And so this is a matter of balancing. The developer is going to try to do a balancing act to see what they can do to get the income they need. And then the city, whether it's HPD or HDC or both, then also do it. We act like a bank. We have a division of new construction finance, and they do the underwriting. They figure out what works and what makes sense. The other chart that I sent, which is the one that has rows of multicolor, there are categories, as Chuck mentioned, that different amounts are categorized in different ways. The lowest being extremely low income, which is up to 30% of AMI, and then very low, low, moderate, and middle. As I said before, since we don't subsidize units over 120%, the buildings that get subsidized by our programs don't include what would be classified as middle income, only up to moderate. And then that chart that I sent shows the color coded again for family size, where the range falls in. The maximum that would be allowed for somebody to apply and the minimum that would be needed in order to make it work. So again, the most common the development that goes on in large parts of the Bronx are as I described. Interestingly and sometimes surprisingly, even in the deep South Bronx, there are buildings being built without construction subsidy from the city and looking to charge very high rents. And they may be right down the block from a building that we are financing and with difficulty to make work, in fact. Anybody who drives down the Major Deegan, you know, when they get down to around 138th Street, between 138th Street and Third Avenue Bridge, we'll see a number of big buildings that are, a couple of them are completed, others are in the works. Those, for the most part, are not using our programs. They're not getting construction subsidy. They are using, of course, the tax incentive programs, which makes a big difference, but they're not using public subsidy money for construction. They also, therefore, are going to be charging fairly high rents. I often say, I hope for their benefit, they know what they're doing, that they will be able to get those higher rents in those locations. Bringing the focus up to the Northwest Bronx and most of the North Bronx, we've not done very many buildings in the North Bronx in terms of financing in recent years. Partly because the market is such that most developers think that they don't need the subsidy from the city, and therefore they can build without that, but just by using the tax incentive program. Again, some of them just don't want to deal with the requirements that we have. And so they decide that they can get money from a bank and then build without that subsidy, and that they can get $3,000 or more for rent per month for an apartment. So these are the basics. I don't doubt that many or most of you already know all of this, but if I'll be happy if there's any other questions about this or other aspects of what we do in affordable housing. I'm happy to respond to that.
So let me, if I may, and thank you first, Ted, as usual, you provide light and illumination where it otherwise does not exist. Let me focus on three questions. What is affordable in Riverdale is not affordable in the South Bronx in many parts, and in Harlem and elsewhere in the city of New York. And what's affordable even in Kingsbridge is not affordable in other parts. And so my question is, assuming that there is real merit to the ranges that you have now, the four ranges that you have that you outlined in that chart. And again, if anybody would like a copy of the link or the like, please communicate with the district office and they will give you that information tomorrow morning. Assuming that that's a good idea, it seems to me it lacks three elements. One, people don't know what they are. What it is, I don't think you will find 5 people in 100 in Riverdale, on Park Avenue, and on the west side. Well, maybe on the west, in the Republic of the West Side, you may find those 5, but you probably won't find 5 in most parts who know what the AMI is, that it includes for all of Long Island, it includes Scarsdale and Westchester, and so those places have a distortive effect. And the first question is transparency. Is there a reason why we cannot, when a owner or developer builds a building in which that developer or owner gets to have access to affordability as a slogan or as a marketing tool or a financial aid in one form or another, that we can't have transparency for the benefit of the prospective tenants and the current tenants, a posting that this is a tier one building that looks for income in level A, level B, or level C, so that people know. Is there a reason we can't do that?
I'm not sure what you're asking in terms of not telling who. What do you think is not transparent?
You could not tell me if I looked at a building, whether or not that building, though called affordable, is affordable for someone of my income,
Oh,
your income, or the like. People should know this is affordable in a given range when they are looking for it, number one. And when judgments are made as to what is affordable in that area.
okay, I think as far as the people themselves, I mean, that, and I'll say two different things. One is that I think everybody needs to decide for themselves what they think is affordable for themselves. If somebody's looking for an apartment, you know, they need to be able to figure out for themselves based on their income and their costs, you know, how much do they think they could afford to pay, you know, in terms of what they're looking for. The other point I'll make, which is again, the rule of thumb that's used, is that 30% of income. That if you're paying more than 30% of your income for shelter, then you're considered rent burdened, which is the phrase that's used. If more than half the city pays more than 30% of their income, so more than half the city is rent burdened. If you're over 50%, if you're paying over 50% of your income for shelter, for rent, then you're extremely rent burdened. And unfortunately, about a third of people in the Bronx are extremely rent burdened. One of the interesting things, and I actually looked this week, you know, for different areas. I didn't see it by community district, but I did see, I got a website that saw it by council district. And so, for example, the 11th council district, which is most of the area that you cover, the percentage of people that are considered rent burden, the percentage of households is about 54%. So that means about 54% of people in the 11th council district are paying over 30% of their income for shelter, for rent.
That means, and that's the whole point of this exercise of these consecutive meetings, is this community wants, needs, and must have more affordable housing. Government has got to provide, and we've got to cooperate in that. But let me ask you a question, Ted, because something you said bothered me. Can you have a mixture in the same building of people in affordable level 1 and people in affordable level 2, or is it all within that first level or second level or third?
Oh, no, that's what I was explaining, is that every building that we finance is mixed income. And so you'll have some units, and it has to be decided in advance if a building is being built, how many units, which units would be at which levels. But again, there'll be some units at 30% of the AMI, some at say 50%, and now it doesn't have to be 30. It could be a range from say 50 to 100. It could be 30 to 80. But almost every single one of the buildings that we finance have a mixed income, have a range of income eligibility. And again, and there's no identification of that after the fact. I mean, it's not like anybody has a sign in their door that says this was a 30% unit or an 80% unit. It's just that those are what's, you know, when people apply, it's seen, it's figured out what kind of level might they be eligible for, and those are the units that they would be considered for. I won't get into anything now, you know, but you know, of course, a lot of that also then goes through the lottery system, where people apply, and then there's the computer runs the lottery and picks out people who then get preference for those units in that particular building.
But let me just stay back with the issue of the mix. We heard earlier about a building that's being built that has 30% affordable. Now, in those 30%, there's nothing that would stop, and I'm not saying that is going to be the case, that would stop that owner of getting the top tier in the income for that building for all but one apartment and have one apartment at a lower level, is that right?
No,
And
that's
yes,
not,
yes, they'll call it affordable.
no. What happens is when a building is being built using our financing programs and HDCs, we have a marketing unit, a large unit that oversees the whole marketing process. When a building is about roughly, say, 2/3 finished, then the developer has to meet with the marketing unit. If there's HDC money in the project, the HDC marketing unit handles it. If there is no HDC money, the HPD one does. It's the same rules. And so the developer has to meet with our marketing staff. They have to present what their marketing plan is. There have to be advertisements that have to go into a citywide paper, an ethnic paper, and a local paper. It's all computerized, and people, I think at this point, know that. And so the developer has to, or the marketing representative, as many of them use, has to then present for each apartment in that building what it's designated as. Is it a 30% unit? Is it a 50% unit? Is it an 80% unit? And then when they start opening up after the lottery and they start looking at the applications, that is also overseen by our marketing unit. So if what you're saying is that, like, someone could say that their building would be, let's say, half 30 to 50% and half 50 to 80%, and instead just charge all 100%, that can't happen.
Well, if it's enforced properly, correct?
Sorry?
If it's enforced
Yes.
properly,
Yes.
can't happen. And who has the responsibility for enforcement?
Again, we have a marketing unit and HTC has a marketing unit.
Right.
The developer has to show the staff person handling this, the exact, who's getting it, who the application is, what they make. It's all overseen.
All right. I have monopolized this too much, so let me call on Bob Bender as the first speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Weinstein. That was a very helpful discussion that we just had. I want to ask you, every community board in the city issues a district needs statement. And many of those district needs statements, including for this board, affordable housing is the #1 need in that district. And I'm curious, from your perspective, having done this as long as you have, what is the biggest obstacle to building more affordable housing? I've heard people say the real problem is zoning, that they're zoning for 1 and 2 family houses is a real obstacle to building affordable housing, and it should be done away with. But from someone who's done it as long as you have and has your level of expertise, I'd like to hear from you what you think the biggest issue is.
Well, the greatest amount of affordable housing that, I don't want to say that we've done because we don't actually build anything, that we facilitated through, I always often say that what we do is we offer 3 things. We offer land when it's available, we offer financing, and we offer tax incentives. 20, 30 years ago, unfortunately, the city had a lot of land. The blight of the 1970s and 1980s, particularly in the South Bronx and Central Brooklyn and Upper Manhattan, resulted in the city owning a lot of property. And then, so those properties were then used. We were offered through various programs, we would offer them, and developers would be selected to build on them. And while there's still some left, the great majority have been developed. If you see a vacant lot, if you drive by and you see a vacant lot, it's probably not city owned. And if it is, it's probably already earmarked for a program. So it's the first problem then is the land. See, and an example would be, let's say somebody has a vacant lot in the North Bronx and they feel that the market is such that they can get rents at $3,000, $4,000 a month. They're not going to use our program. They're not going to, want to do affordable housing if they don't have it. Now, again, certain tax incentive programs require it, like for 21A, that require that a certain percentage of the units in the building be below a certain level. But for the most part, that building, whatever they call the market rent. And so again, if somebody feels that they can fairly easily build a building and get rents of a certain level that would give them whatever profit they need, because very few people build housing for philanthropic reasons. And so if they feel that they can make it work without using a city program and construction subsidy, they will, but then there's a limit to how much affordable they're providing. And the only affordable they're providing really is if the tax program that they're using requires it, or in some cases, if they've done a rezoning, and then there's what they call mandatory inclusionary housing, MIH. That also then, if you use that, or in certain areas you have to do it, then again, a certain percentage, usually it's 30% of the units have to be, but the 30% of the units that have to be affordable don't have to be less than 130% of AMI. And if you look at the chart again, you'll see 130% of the AMI is not low. And so some of those buildings, for example, that I mentioned down off the Deegan, that are not using public construction money, but they are using the tax incentive programs, the quote affordable units that they're going to be offering may well be at 130% of the AMI. In most other areas or developers, there are many developers who that's what they do. They do affordable housing. They'll even do 100% affordable. And that's what we try to push. I try to encourage developers to use our programs and provide 100% affordable. But more and more over the last several years, we've not seen that. We get I see some places where developers are proposing to build fairly small buildings, again, in areas where I would think you have to have construction subsidy to make it work, and they're not coming to us. I sense that what they're doing is they're putting in a lot of small units, and therefore by maximizing the number of units, by doing a lot of studios and 1 bedrooms, doing apartments that only say 500 square feet, they can get more units, therefore they get more income, more rental income, they can make it work.
That's why I asked that question on Kingsbridge Road.
So the challenges, to answer the question, are availability of land or lack of, and a certain amount of, I guess, resources in terms of financing. We have a pipeline right now. If somebody walked in the door tomorrow and said, I own a property in the Bronx and I want to build affordable housing and I want to use financing from HPD, they probably will not be able to start construction, I'd say 3 years, because there's such a pipeline, such a backup there, the backlog of demand. So certainly, again, sort of lack of land. Construction costs, particularly this year, has gone up quite a bit. I've heard from a lot of the developers that a project they were planning last year, they can't do that same project because the construction costs have gone up so much. And so a combination of all of these things are the problems that are standing in the way of doing more affordable housing. Zoning is a problem in that, obviously, if an area is zoned for only small homes, then you can't do a 100-unit building. It's not going to happen. But I would tell you, and it's no surprise, I'm sure, to any of you, that the position of the administration, city administration, is that everybody must do their part, that there's a citywide affordable housing crisis, and that every area has to do its part to some extent, at least.
Let me touch on both of the point, the question that Bob Bender asked you in your response. The MTA embarked upon a program under which 4 railway stations would be built alongside the Hutchinson River Parkway area. Alongside the Morris Park proposal, or almost alongside, is the abandoned, non-used New York State Hospital for the Mentally Ill. Most of that property is no longer used for that purpose. And my question is, when you have property like that, which is ideal, close to transportation, close to education, close to medical facilities and the like, why government cannot step in and just direct it shall be used for that purpose? There may be a more profitable purpose, like the tech center that was built on a portion of it by DeSimone. But if we want to have affordable housing, why is it the government cannot and should not step in and say, this is going to be used for housing? And by the way, that's true in all sorts of places in this town. Any reason, Ted?
I can't speak for that particular building. And then, you know, one of the things over the last few years and certainly still now, again, going back that during the 1970s and 1980s, the city acquired so many properties because people didn't pay their real estate taxes or because of urban renewal. And so that was for quite a while, there was a good supply of sites, of properties to build on. There's not that much of that left. And so what has been happening is looking for other opportunities. And I'll give you a few. For example, NYCHA buildings. You know, many of the NYCHA buildings were built when Tower in the Park was the common design aspect. You know, you build a nice big building surrounded by a lot of grass. You know, there were certain good aspects of it. I personally grew up in one, and I liked the idea of not having a canyon effect, the feeling I was living in a canyon of buildings. But at the same time, it goes against the idea of a good street front. It's space that could have been used. But what's happening now, and it has been happening, is NYCHA has been looking at all of their developments, all their campuses, and there were definitely some where there's an unused parking lot or underused parking lot, or maybe there's an area of grass that nobody uses for anything. Maybe it was supposed to be used for barbecuing and it's not. And so one by one, where these opportunities exist, NYCHA and HPD are working together to then provide the land, HPD provides the financing with HTC, and then to build another building in that area. So you might have like one of these super blocks that have a few NYCHA buildings, but a nice big open empty area, and then they build a building there. For many years, different other public agencies controlled vacant lots for different reasons. I mean, I remember that, you know, I would find a nice vacant lot that I thought would be good, and we'd find out that another government agency controlled it and wouldn't give it up. Well, that hasn't been the administration's attitude, the previous one or this one anymore. And so therefore, you know, where another agency may have it, may control it, the decision is being made that, well, instead, it's a good one for affordable housing.
That's what I was focusing on, Ted. There are lots of those. So in the Belmont area, for example, there's an abandoned sanitation garage, which takes up a huge section of a block. There are all sorts of places like that. But when you focus on NYCHA, let me just give you a contrary viewpoint. People there are being forced or are required to, for their own sake, to live like if they were in a sardine can. If you take away any green grass around them or air or space, that's not really great.
No, that's correct. It has to make sense. You know, I should mention also the Michelamas. A lot of the Michelamas were built Tower in the Park with a lot of empty space. And so they also, in some cases, the owner of the Michelama itself is looking to build another building, you know, right next to the existing building in space. And so there are these types of opportunities, but they're not enough. And so in some cases, it's rezoning becomes the tool to use to allow for more density than might otherwise be allowed.
Ms. Chong.
Hello, Lee.
Hi, Ted. Long time. We know each other from way back. Question about affordability. Everyone's talking about it. My understanding from my recollection of doing this for a living for over 20 years, the AMI that you're talking about is the HUD AMI. And my understanding is that it's only legally required to use that AMI if federal dollars are in place. And it's at the discretion of the city and the state housing agency or whatever other agency is involved to use that. Why can't, and this is, I've done this, so I know from fact, to push to have the AMI of the local community board where the development is taking place, and even to go further, to use the census tract, because city planning tracks the census tract income level of each community. So if the community board, the local elected officials put the screws to the developer to create quote unquote true affordable housing, it can be done. Tell me I'm living in a fantasy world.
Well, truthfully, I don't know exactly how that number comes about to say that the city or the state has the ability to do its own system. I don't know that. Remembering that because there are a number of federal programs that use the AMI. The low-income
I
housing.
agree. No, Ted, I'm saying if there is no federal dollars.
No, but I'm not talking federal dollars. The low-income housing tax credits, which is probably the most commonly used tool for building affordable housing in the country.
But that's federal.
But that's the majority of affordable housing uses that. So you can't say, well, don't use it. So you're not restricted then.
But there are
That's
instances
not
where
realistic.
federal dollars are not used.
But then you're saying that we shouldn't use the LIHTC? We shouldn't use low-income housing tax credits?
Whatever it makes, allows it with, the issue here seems to be the affordability within the community board. And if you can get the census tract for, say, the visitation site and find out what the income
But
guidelines are.
but the other point is that, again, if we used 100% of that AMI as our threshold for eligibility, that would be wrong. But we don't. We use, Lee,
I'm
please.
not saying use 100%.
I know, but Lee, listen, you have to have enough rental income to operate and maintain the building.
Correct.
And so really, what really matters is not so much the percentage of AMI, it's the dollar amount it represents.
Correct.
Well, then you can say, suppose, for example, that instead of the 120,000 that I said before, it's that the median of the geographic area that you're talking about, let's say, was only 60,000, half of it. So would you then say then that should be the threshold? Or would you say,
It depends on case by case where the funding is coming from, private, bank, whatever. And also what can be negotiated between the government, the local community, the elected officials, and the developer.
I'm saying that you need enough dollars coming in to
Yes,
operate and maintain the
I
building.
agree, but that's
Regardless, but
negotiable.
but regardless of what percentage of the AMI it says on paper, you need a certain dollar amount per apartment per month to properly operate and maintain the building.
And perhaps there's a way to negotiate, like real estate taxes, like what they did with Mitchell Lamas.
Well,
You know, the only thing they shouldn't do with Mitchell Lamas is make it a 20-year and make it finite in perpetuity, which is why we've lost so many Mitchell Lamas, but that's a whole nother story.
that's right. So.
Anyway, it's a good discussion. Good talking to you, Ted.
You too, Lee.
No, great discussion. Hey, Ted, how are you? I appreciate
Okay,
all of the
Dave.
information you've been giving us. I just have two questions, one specific to us and one in general. I'll ask you the general question, which is, it was asked before about how do folks know whether or not they can afford a building? Can you tell us a little bit about Housing Connect? And then I'll ask our CV specific question after that.
Sure. Housing Connect is the process that we use for the marketing of units in the buildings that we finance. It's known as the lottery system. For many years, it was done manually. Of course, somebody knew that there was a building being built they might be interested in moving to. They would get a paper application, they'd fill it out, and they send it in. Then if there was another building they were interested in, they'd have to get another application, fill it out, send it in. It was a very labor-intensive process. Smartly, the decision was then made to computerize the whole system. And so what happens now is you go into the system, into the website, and it asks for your profile. and you provide all the information, you know, who you are, where you live, how many in your household, what your income is, you provide all that. That's your profile. As long as your situation doesn't change, that's you. You don't have to do it twice or 3 times or 4 times. You do it once. Then you go to the point where there's a screen that tells you what developments, what new project, new buildings are accepting applications. And again, what you used to have to do is, you know, if there was a building on, you know, Riverdale Avenue, you'd have to get an application, you'd have to mail for the application, get it, fill it out, send it back. And then if there was a building on Kingsbridge Road, you'd have to get the application, fill it out, send it back. Now you just go to that page, which tells you which buildings, which projects throughout the city are accepting applications. And you then just click next to the ones you want to apply for. And then you go click, click, click. Then that all goes into the computer. The great thing about this, it became so easy. I don't want to say there's a downside, but is that it's very easy because what you then have is you have people just going click, 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 all the way down the line and figure, okay, you know, let's see, you know, what comes through. Our marketing people have told me that next to income eligibility, the next highest reason for people to be disqualified and not going forward is they don't show up. They don't respond to their notices because they have to go and click, 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 click. They then get a notice, you know, a Bronx person gets a notice that there's a building in Brooklyn that's ready to interview you. And then the person says, well, I don't want to live in Brooklyn. And so they just ignore it. So, you know, what you can, you know, if you do this right, you can actually look and see, okay, I want to apply for this building and that building and this building, and you click on those. Now, the other, and I hate to call it a problem because if you're building, let's say a building of about 100 units, you may well get 50,000 applications. You may get 50,000 people who clicked for your building. The great majority of people will never even be notified for an appointment or for an interview. And what that shows is 2 things. It shows, again, that the system is very easy to use, but it also shows the depth of the affordable housing crisis, how much of a demand there really is for new affordable housing.
And my second question, CB specific, is this: do we have any, you know, HPD financed in part projects within CB8 at this time? And I don't know if you would have the answer to that question or anything within the pipeline that's going 3-4 years.
Not much, truthfully. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
you already talked a little bit tonight about the old vegetation site. I know there's been some interest. I heard from somebody along Broadway in the upper 230s, I guess. You know, so, you know, but there's not a lot has been done. And again, it goes back to the point that if a developer feels that they can get the higher rents by not using the city program, then that's what they might want to do.
And would HPD normally reach out to the CB to let us know if something was coming up? Like, would they ask the developer to come to the CB to speak to us?
Our policy is that, and I've been really the one to push this, if someone is asking us for financing, they are required to contact the community board. And if the community board says, well, we want you to come and do a presentation, they have to do that. I will sometimes, in this came up.
Do not, Ted, they do not.
Well,
And this is a question I ask at every HDC board meeting.
If they're asking again for us for the financing, I mean, if they're not asking us for financing, then we have no right to tell them what to do. But if they are asking us for financing, we will tell them that maybe not immediately, because we don't want them coming in and saying, well, we're going to do this. We have this idea of doing a project in a certain way, and then nothing happens for a couple of years and numbers change and all that. But as soon as they start having something somewhat concrete, and I don't mean that figuratively, literally, I mean it figuratively, then yes, we tell them, go to the community board. And we want to hear what the community board has to say.
I will tell you, the
Thank
best
you,
of my
Ted.
recollection, there haven't been 5 in the last 10 years that have done that.
Well, I would then say that if anybody is aware of a HPD financed building, that has not contacted the community board, then please let us know, in the Bronx, at least for me.
Well, I guess on the other way around, for the CB, is it possible for us to find out what's out there so that we know?
Yes, I can, we have a database that can filter it and we can, I can find that.
That'd be great. Thank you, Ted. Thanks so much for all the info.
I will tell you, if I may just take a moment again, that the New York Housing Conference, which is an organization that encourages development, they recently did a tracking, they call it, where for each city council district in the city, they put together a ton of information, of data. And I mean, it got a little bit of media attention because they identified the 5 council districts that had the least amount of affordable housing over the last, say, 8 years. And then the 5 that had the most. The 11th council district actually was pretty well up on there. So, but, you know, there are a couple of in the Bronx that have very little affordable housing done.
So let me ask you this question, Ted. What are the reasons why, where you have certain instances of a significant sized piece of property, why government cannot step in and, using its eminent domain powers, acquire the land?
Well, for many years, when calling it urban renewal, that is what happened. But then, you know, the city, I think everybody agreed, the city was not its own then best landlord in terms of, you know, running. I mean, well, but you just like you're not supposed to spot zone, you're also not supposed to do like urban renewal that way, just like, you know, one little site, you know, you have to do like a whole block or whole area. The best use of that was where you had, let's say, a block, and let's say you had 20 properties on the block, and like a checkerboard, you know, it was privately owned, city-owned, private, city, private, like that. And then so you use, and the ones that were city-owned because the owner had to pay the real estate taxes. So then by using urban renewal, eminent domain, you then acquire those other properties to create an assemblage.
So let me ask you a question. There is a rumor going around that an educational institution in this community is on the verge of getting rid of its dormitory. And depending on what the landmass is, depending upon the age of the property, why can't government say, you want to get rid of it? We'll take it. We'll then offer it for development by somebody as affordable housing. Truly affordable housing.
I think there was a time not that long ago where EDC, the city's Economic Development Corporation, was looking at acquiring properties for just that purpose. But there was a lot of criteria. Obviously, the city didn't want to spend a tremendous amount of money. And that was one of the problems, is that, you know, EDC would find vacant lots for sale, but for an amount of money that it felt was not reasonable to spend that much money to acquire the property. I mean, as the market improved in a lot of these areas, again, the price of acquisition increased. And so it didn't really result in much when they tried doing that.
David?
Yes, thank you. Ted, you and I discussed this briefly. The prospect of doing sort of the Manhattan Expressway, which is the Cross Bronx over Manhattan, those 3 monstrous apartment buildings. I think that if we did the same thing, sort of a Hudson Yards kind of thing, put steel over way east of there on the Cross Bronx, you could put up tens and tens of thousands of apartments, all within walking distance of a subway. But that would be one way of getting lots and lots and lots of affordable housing. But anyway, going back to your chart, if a family of 6 were earning, say, $45,000 in that range, what is, other than good common sense, what is to stop a developer from allowing that family to save money and take a studio rather than a 3-bedroom?
Well, again, the supervision of the marketing process that HPD and HDC do. that, you know, it's just not allowed. So you
Okay.
You just can't do it.
Okay. Straightforward answer. Thank you.
Yeah. And I never remember to get them straight, but also for each apartment size, there is a criteria of number of people. And, you know, like a studio could be 1 or 2 people, you know, and so on and so on. Yeah.
Okay, good. So logic does prevail. Thank you.
So we are quite clear about this. In a prior administration, not this one, politics was allowed to impact in that area in terms of lessening the supervision. And so that's something that's got to be watched. Jody.
Wow, this has got to be one of my favorite land use meetings. Thank you, Ted. This has been kind of interesting. I want to go to something that Lee said. You mentioned about truly affordable. I think that's the bigger
You froze.
goal, because
Jody, you're breaking up.
oh, I'm sorry.
Can you fix that, Jody?
Better now?
Yep.
Is that better?
Yes, go ahead. Speak
Okay,
up.
so 30% AI is actually after taxes, 42%, 50% of your income. And when you're in these lower brackets, like I can't afford affordable housing. I worked 20 years at a major nonprofit institution, and I didn't even qualify for the building that was built next door to me. So can you talk a little bit about what other opportunities are? You mentioned a lot about operational costs and construction costs. What are other things that could be to sort of bring down this, the rents? Because it's $1,800 for a studio apartment and you have to make $65,000. And as Lee mentioned, it's in neighborhoods where you can't move to another apartment because you don't make enough of the affordable housing. So what else can we do as a community member? Where can we put some pressure to kind of make sure that they're being built in?
It's a problem. I mean, housing in New York is expensive. And so that's why, you know, again, we're always looking for sites, you know, what might be a good location, a good site, to, you know, knowing that the majority of vacant land is no longer city owned, it's privately owned. You know, again, we're looking, again, like I said before, I remember years ago, you know, that there was, it was an urban renewal site, in fact, that that a nearby police station was using to park their private cars. And under the urban renewal plan, it's supposed to be used for housing. You know, it took quite a bit of time to be able to get that site to be able to do the housing. And this is something that, again, the city administration is doing, is looking at places where, you know, different agencies might be using a lot that maybe they don't really need it. Where
Are they doing that now, Ted?
yes,
Is
I'll
there
give
an agency
you an
doing it?
example. We just issued a request for proposals a few weeks ago, in the South Bronx, right by St. Mary's Park, where there was a vacant lot next to a school building, and the staff were using the vacant lot for parking. And the council member in the area came in and said, you know, that would be a good site for more housing, affordable housing. And that's what we're doing. Now, what we agreed to do in that particular case was then also have the developer provide some parking. But, you know, it's, I don't know if I want to say nothing is sacred about, but, you know, we need opportunities. I would personally, I'd like to see more mixed use type of, you know, build. There's one place in North Manhattan where they're building housing over a library, you know, things like that, you know, mixed use type of things. But, you know, where you have, instead of a school next to a residential building, you know, have the first few floors be the school and the residential building above that. You know, that's one of the things that people are looking at is how do we be creative in terms of creating new opportunities?
Maybe the answer
Great.
could be a czar to start looking on where you could acquire property. There's a huge parking lot opposite the Allen Pavilion, used just for parking. St. Barnabas turned over its parking lots for housing. And Moelis put in affordable housing there. We can do it if people push for it, and that's where the issue comes. Laura.
Hi, I want to thank Ted for all this information. I have a quick announcement. Community Board 8 is sponsoring an HPD van outreach day. We are coordinating that with Councilman Dinowitz. An HPD outreach van will be at West 231st Street and Godwin Terrace. They will be equipped with multi-language workers. We will be there from 11 a.m. to 2. And tenants will learn how to file a housing complaint and understanding different rights and preparing how do they join a lottery in affordable housing. And owners will learn how to register their buildings, remedy a violation, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is a terrific service that HPD is giving to communities. And I invite everybody to check it out on Thursday, this Thursday, October 6th, 11 to 2 at West 231st Street in Godwin. So thank you, Ted.
Good, thank you.
Ted, let me just ask you, because I don't see any other hands up at the moment. Let me ask you one question on the subject of land acquisition. Is there any agency in New York that has been charged with acquiring property, whether it be land, excess air rights over buildings and the like, to make it available for affordable housing? And I keep saying affordable because I hate that word, because it means so many things to so many people, really affordable for people, that can be done. I mean, you just look around and you can see these vacant pieces of property with a sign, we're going to build something here. And they say they're doing earthwork, but who the hell knows what's going to happen? So if the city could step in and acquire by condemnation, which you can close on within less than 30 days from the time it serves the notice. Number two, if it does that, it can then provide land cost relief, provided that they have certain kinds of affordable housing, the developer. So you provide the land cost relief. And then you can manipulate that also in the proper sense of manipulation to provide other forms of relief in terms of planning and the like, getting it through the Department of Buildings and the other agencies. It seems to me that that urban renewal was a pretty good idea in the beginning. It just got carried away, as so many things do, by arrogance of public officials.
I think one of the problems now is that because the land market is strong, again, the acquisition costs are high. You know, back in the 1970s and 80s, it was cheap land. And so aside from the fact that the city was taking property in rem for people not paying their taxes, if somebody had to buy it, it wasn't expensive. Now it's there's a property I'm aware of that it's next to a city property, and a development team has purchased the private property to create an assemblage, and they're paying $16 million for that private property. That's part of the problem, is that it just really is expensive.
See, as you will find documented in a whole range of things, including bonfire at the Vanities, that was where I was taking over the land, condemning it, and saying it's gone. And that's how you had a bank for many years. That's why I want to see us do again.
Yeah. One of the things that is happening, Chuck, that you mentioned about like doing things also to help with buildings department filings and things like that. There are people who are working on trying to think of ways to speed up the process. And we all know the administration's attitude is get things done. There are people who are looking, okay, how can we make the process smoother so that instead of taking 3-4 years to build a building, maybe only 2 years or something like that.
I think you provide the perfect example. of what public service can be, the kind of people and quality that enter it, and the scholarship and intellectual level that you can find from those who enter public service. Are there any more questions before I release Ted after our ordeal? Ted, you are as always wonderful. I may strong arm you to return again. I thank you very much. I think we all owe you an immense debt of gratitude that can never be adequately paid.
That's right. I enjoyed letting people know what we do.
Thank
Thanks as always, Ted.
Thank you.
All right, if with your permission, I'd like to move on. The next item is going to be a very brief report from the Riverdale Avenue Working Group. Dave Gelvin or Marty Wolpoff? Marty.
Yeah, I hope it's as brief as you wish. We had not met over the summer, and we finally got to meet last week, and were able to catch up on a lot of things in conversation. I just want to indicate that we concluded with the fact that henceforth we're going to have monthly meetings, and that we're also going to get updates on their construction plan. We've received an overview that requires updating, and we're going to be able to get that. In exchange for our cooperation, no exchange of their cooperation, they have requested that they be granted a what's the word?
Authorization.
Okay, authorization via the community board for them to expand number of hours of construction on Saturdays to begin 1 hour earlier. They have presented that part of the issue is being able to get and use the concrete that is coming in. In addition, that will help them finish the construction earlier, and they hope to be out much sooner in the total run. So the recommendation of the committee, and I think at this point, one of the most important persons on the committee of true interest is the neighbor next door at 3751. He speaks on behalf of and contacts with the neighbors and the co-op board, and they have no objection to allowing this extra hour. So the recommendation is to accept, to offer to the community board at our next meeting that we approve their request for the extra hour.
The extra hours on starting time on Saturdays now is 10 a.m. and they would, once the concrete pouring comes into effect, they'd like to start at 9 o'clock on Saturdays only. Mark, what say you? Mark Gottheld.
I've spoken with other owners in the building. The majority feel that that would be fine. I mean, the construction work they do on Saturday doesn't really cause a great deal of noise. Other stuff they do during the week does, but in terms of the concrete work on Saturday, we really don't have an objection to starting earlier if that helps them to finish sooner.
All right. We have a resolution proposed on the floor to permit that. Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion? Any opposition? Second time, any opposition? Hearing none, the motion is deemed carried. And it'll go to the full board for approval. The next item on the agenda is the subject of non-permitted work at Chervier's parking lot. Now, this is the second time, at least, around that this issue has gotten to this board. In less than a year ago, we had the same problem. What they're doing there is cutting down trees. There are several neighbors who have compiled photographic evidence of it. We invited Chevier to have a representative here tonight. Is there anyone here? Anyone here? Second call. Anyone here for Chevier? This is the
From
second.
Chevier
From
or
Chevier.
about Chevier?
From Chevier. They were invited. Now, they have been invited in the past, they have declined. So that what I'm now going to ask you to do is to authorize me to communicate with the New York State Department of Health and with the New York City Department of Health to ask for an investigation as to their qualification to continue to be licensed to operate a home. They repeatedly have violated the law. They do it with impunity. They don't give a rattle. So I'm making a motion to authorize the chair of the committee to communicate with the Departments of Health of the City of New York and the State of New York concerning their licensure. Do I
Chuck,
have-
can we just, if you can just give a little background on some of the things that I know, I have an idea just because I've seen some of the emails. Could you give the committee some idea of what's happening?
What they have been doing, and then I'll put on Stephanie and Gio, who have been watching this for some time now. They've been chopping down the trees in and around the parking lot as if they're in the process of doing some construction there. Gio, you're on.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with all of you. And it's been really insightful listening in, and I appreciate everything you do for the community. So my name is Gio, and I moved to Riverdale about 4 years ago. One of the reasons why I moved here is because of the landscape and the nature that we have in our neighborhood. So it saddens me when I see that across the street from me, there's no care for the lands. For example, there is garbage. They recently installed some stadium lights that are extremely bright and create pollution for the community. Also, Scott, who's part of your community, on Sunday when I was leaving and it was about to rain, he was out there picking up garbage in front of the parking lot because he was just fed up with the situation. So to say the least, it's just the lack of care and the lack of maintenance that they're showing. And I've called the management and I've asked why they're not just picking up their garbage or fixing their fences or just keeping the neighborhood beautiful, right? Like along with we all live here and we care about just the streets and everything. And I feel like that one area has become an eyesore, and it's not only me, but I know that many of my neighbors feel the same way. And unfortunately, some of them have children that they have to take care of, so they couldn't join. But a lot of our neighbors are very unhappy with what's been happening there. I have photos if you want me to share of what the situation is. I don't
Why don't
think
you show one or two so people can see? We got a new batch earlier today.
Yeah, so I think that you need to give me permission to.
Yes, I just gave you permission. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay, thank you. So this is the park that we all enjoy when we walk outside of our building. So as you can tell, just beautiful. And then here is what the parking lot looks like now after they remove all the greenery. And it just, like I said, it's an eyesore. It's something that everyone in the area has to see and experience.
Let me interrupt you. This is in the SNAD Special Natural Area District. They do not have a permit to do it, and they got a violation for that today.
Okay, yeah. Do you have any more background? Because when I called them, they had said that they were following some official.
They need a formal permit from SNAD, which would have to come to this board for approval. None ever has.
Gio, that first picture I do not think is of that corner. I think it's the far corner.
Oh, the first picture is what drew us to Riverdale. So this
Yes,
is
but that's at the other end of the block, to be fair. I mean, what they're
That's Henry
doing is
Hudson
terrible,
Park.
but I don't
It's
think
Henry
that
Hudson
picture
Park.
is what was cut down.
No, this was not what's cut down. I'm just giving you for,
Okay.
that was now what was cut down, to be clear. That's Henry Hudson Park. And that's what I'm saying, like, that's what we're all hoping, like, that's what we're all accustomed in the neighborhood, right? So we've gone from gorgeous trees and greenery to this.
All right,
Does that
Stephanie,
make sense?
Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. I hadn't originally wanted to be a part of this, but Gio had contacted me because he knew, I was involved with the community, and I gave him advice on how he should, make 311 complaints and forward them to the community board, that was the proper procedure. I've got a lot going on in my life right now. So I've only been peripherally paying attention to this, but I did take pictures when I was walking by various times. And yesterday, when I was on my way back from the market, I actually stopped off at Sarah's house, and I was walking around taking pictures, and I noticed the sound of loud construction. And it's Sunday afternoon, and I can hear it in Sarah's yard. And I get into my car, and I still can hear it inside my car. So, you all know that Sarah only lives about, half a block away, but still. So I decided, well, you know what, I'm going to make a turn here onto 231st Street. And I drove down the street, and I parked my car, and I walked over, and I saw all this construction, all these construction earth movers in various parts of the property. And they were leveling land. They were behind the house, not just in the parking lot, but behind the house. I attempted to take some pictures of that, but of course I didn't want to step onto their property, so I did it from the street. And then I went around to where the parking lot is, and yeah, they were just, going to town, just leveling property behind the house and on the side of the house. So that, and in addition, I don't know if this has come up, but I did send you pictures of the lot that's right next to the house, which apparently around the time that there was a social event at the house about 2 weeks ago, they decided it would be, even though it sat there for years, completely vacant and overgrown with trees and brush, that this would be a great time for them to remove all the vegetation and, yes, chop down trees. And then on top of it, I noticed when I parked my car that there was a completely new fence around this spot. And so I sent you pictures, and I did have a video too of the earth mover, but I tried sending that, but it didn't go through. I actually forwarded that to Dan. I was able to-
If you can forward that and any other pictures you may have to Kira at the board, we will be using them if my resolution is adopted tonight.
Right.
Judy.
So this is a long history arguing with Charlier over their trees. So can you hear me, Chuck?
Yep.
Okay, great. So when they built the huge building that's there now, they cut down a 50-year-old maple without a permit. Many of these are Independence Avenue.
Jody, turn off your video. It's taking up too much bandwidth.
Is that better?
Yes.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. That's strange. So 2019, the same thing. They took down 3 trees. We had an inspector go right out. They were told to stop work, And as soon as the inspector left, they cut down the tree, and here we are again, late day weekend on a Sunday. Sora, I immediately notified Sora, she put the 311 complaint in. They did get a $5,000 fine, but that's what we've been complaining about forever, is it's just the cost of doing business and it's not a deterrent. So as far as I know, the owners are leasing to the group that operates the facility. So that adds a lot of layers of complexity to this. But Sura has been talking, as I'm glad to hear Gio was. Sura has been talking to. She was with us for a little while. I don't know if she's back, but she's been talking to them and trying to get them to be more aware. That's our biggest problem. People don't even know that they live in it and that they have to do stuff. And the ones that do ignore it, and they get a little tiny fine, but we've lost all those trees and all that vegetation
That is
already.
why we're,
So
that is the purpose of the resolution. Marty.
Yes, Jody just touched on what I wanted to talk about. When we first learned about this last time, we learned that Chervier was not operating Chervier, and that there was a subsidiary organization running it who claimed ignorance. When we invited when they first learned allegedly that they were in the natural features district, they were surprised and were going to come back and talk to us. They never came back. So this is lies and subterfuge, and they need to be taught a lesson.
Mr. Kronigsberger, is it?
Krumpinger, hi.
Hi.
Oh yeah, just to echo what Gio said. I'm his neighbor. I live across the street, and there's just basic maintenance that's being neglected here. I don't know if they really ever inspect the property. When I was there on Sunday, there's broken glass, there's garbage that's there for months. We try to walk. We're just talking about the sidewalk that's abutting the parking lot. And it's not necessarily the parking lot itself. Obviously, we don't go in there, but the sidewalk is littered with garbage for months. There's broken glass, and as Gio said, there's now, over the last couple of weeks, they've installed these really high luminescent lights that beam right in to the western side of our building. So I don't know. And on Sunday, when I was there with Gio, I kind of took it upon myself to start picking up garbage, and it was interesting. Within about 5 minutes of me doing that, someone showed up and started spreading pesticide on the property. So it's almost as if they're surveilling it, and they see someone doing something, and they, oh, I got to get someone out there. Then I guess as Stephanie said, maybe later on they started doing construction that same day. Yesterday, I'm talking about. So just to add my 2 cents to this, my own observations.
What do you mean construction? Are they building something?
I thought Stephanie, yeah, did you say that, Stephanie?
All right, I don't know. I don't know that they're building something,
Okay.
but to me, my intuition shows me that they have a plan, okay? Because they're just doing too much. Originally, I heard that that they were just getting ready for a social event that was going to be happening at this residence. They had about, I don't know, 300-400 people at some event. It was to welcome a Torah, I believe, and that was a one-time thing, that they were cleaning up the adjacent lot, because apparently there were a lot of animals. Yeah, we live in Spiden-Divo. We have animals all over the place. I have coyotes in my garbage bin all the time. But it started with the parking lot. Now it's behind the house, and now it's next to the house.
You know
They
who owns
cleared
that
the
house?
street.
Who owns that house?
Jody may
All right.
know better than
Here's
I.
what I'd like you to
Bon
do.
Secours owns all of it.
Here's what I'd like to have the address of the house. Give it to Kira. We'll find out who owns it. All right. We'll
Chuck, so Bon Secours sold the property to a team who purchases healthcare facilities, and then they lease them out to the operators. That's the complexity.
Shades of Bernard Birnbaum
Yeah,
Yep.
so many of those houses are on the lot that we call Chevier, but all the violations, they're tagged to all the different addresses. So
All right. Let me move on to people who have not spoken yet. Sora?
Hi, as far as that house is concerned, it's part of our association and it has always been owned by Chervier. I have not seen that it has changed hands. Chervier, whoever Chervier is, but we'll call them Chervier for the moment. Chervier has somehow donated it to the group that's occupying it and that had the celebration, but it's definitely Chervier property.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now, Paula,
I
hold on. I need a second, if there is a second, from a member of the committee to the resolution authorizing the committee chair to communicate with the health departments to see if their licensure is properly conducted under all circumstances. Do I have a second?
Second.
So Chuck, you're asking to see if their licenses is up to date?
I want their,
I mean, if we can-
I want it investigated by the health department to see if they're qualified to continue to be licensed. When you violate the law with impunity and consistently, you are not a qualified person under the health department regs. That's how we got Bernard Bergman and Hollander many years ago. Been there, done that.
Chuck, if I may, I went by while they were doing their work, and it surely seems to me like they're gilding the lily, just like what happened when we cleaned up the CSX property and before the sale went through. I think that they are trying to just pretty it up so they can sell it to somebody else. They're clear cutting a lot of scruffy shrubs and short trees and that parking lot and all that. That house, I think, was only bought in the last couple of years. I think they want to sell a very large property, which has a very, very large undeveloped segment at the other end of the block at Palisade Avenue.
Right. So, I see the representative of Councilman Dinowitz, Fred. Frederick.
Yeah, hi Chuck. I would be remiss if I did not share, given the suggestion or request that you're making of the committee. Our office did receive a complaint from somebody who wanted to be anonymous, unable to corroborate it, but I just thought you should be aware. The complaint was that there were staffing issues around the same time as that party, that an entire floor was left without a nurse on duty or only one, nurse on duty. So I would sort of just, I would be remiss if I did not include or mention that now, if you're inquiring the health department about their licensure, perhaps inquiries in their staffing ratios, both leading up to and after the implementation of the recently enacted legislation regarding such a subject.
Thank you. Liz. Liz?
Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to add, and I don't know, if this is helpful or not, but they were leaving, chopping down a bunch of the trees just either last week or the week before. And I stopped and asked one of the workers, why was he chopping down so many trees? And he had a truck full of trees with tree branches. And his reply to me was, oh, no, these are just weeds. We're only chopping down weeds. These aren't trees. But you could see, all the branches sticking out of his truck. So I don't know if that's the company line that they're trying to give to get away with doing what they're doing, but that's what he tried to convince me of.
Okay.
Whatever they're going to want to build, they're going to have to build within SNAD. Here is one board member who will vote against it. We have a motion on the.
Chuck, Let Chuck give Paula a chance. She lives right across the street. Long-time resident.
I live across the street from the property on 231st near Palisade, and I've researched the property. Servier owns that whole area. They own the whole frontage on 231st Street going back. And I have spoken with the company that bought the Servier from Bon Secours. It's called TL Management, and I've spoken with someone there. A fellow denies that they have any plans, but there is that vacant lot, and there have been rumors that they were planning to build on it, and they have not applied for any permits, but they do own the whole thing. And the fellow was, he wasn't too eager to communicate with me, but I mean, he was pretty nasty, but I mean, he just said, we're not doing anything. And they did subdivide the property, the tax lot recently. And I asked him why they did that. And he said, for internal financial purposes, but I
Paula,
don't.
if you will share with Kira as soon as you can,
Yeah,
the research you have, it'll help me in framing the letter, assuming my resolution carries.
I can do that tomorrow. I sent you an email, but apparently you didn't get it.
All right, I didn't get.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those who are board members and members of the Land Use Committee, would you please raise your hands if you are in favor of the resolution? Let me turn that around. Is there anybody who is opposed? Speak up. Hearing no opposition and seeing hands up, the motion is carried. I will take it to the board at its next meeting. If it's adopted, I will proceed to seek licensure revocation. All right, that takes us over to
Approval of the minutes.
approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any objections? That's done. Now, let me just tell you where I would like to go in terms of affordable housing and the rest. I have two very well-known public officials, both of whom are quite prepared to come here, but they said that my friend Mr. Weinstein probably knows more about what we are looking at than anyone in the world, and I totally agree with that. What I would like to do now is to spend some time noodling with members of the committee for a resolution on 3 or 4 issues. One, I really think that we have got to provide knowledge to the people who are prospective tenants, what the rent is at some point before they go out, and what the mix is in the building, transparency of what they're doing. I think City of New York has not only an obligation to provide shelter, but that obligation is to provide housing for people that's fit for living and fit for a city of New York. And that's, to that extent, it needs to get into motion a program to assemble, if necessary by condemnation, property that can be then developed, and the developer will get a break on the land costs and other vehicles, or maybe financing of it, so that we have land available and get rid of that and put a priority on this thing. There isn't anybody I've talked to who doesn't agree that we need affordable housing. The disagreement is what is affordable and how do you measure it and who's doing the measuring and the like. And that's something that I think you pointed a finger as to some of the areas that we need to, I think, clear up in that regard. And so if any members of the public or of the committee have any thoughts for inclusion or would want to work on trying to pull together something that we can present on the subject, that would be much appreciated. But it seems to me the time has come to deal with that first issue, which is we are in favor of affordable housing, yes, but here is what you've got to do this is how we can get it started, and here's how we can get it going. Then there are subsequent issues that follow from that. Is there anybody who has a view? Well, if you do later on, I have a lady who is, I'm looking at right now, who knows more about this stuff than anyone other than Brother Weinstein, and if necessary, deal with, we've got to do this throughout the city of New York. It just doesn't make any sense. Think about the comment that somebody made. I make $30,000 a year and there's nothing available for me. It's just not acceptable. We spend money for all sorts of nonsense. Okay, time to get off the soapbox. Is there anybody who has anything under new business or old business? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion,
Second,
second.
all those in favor? Do I hear any objections? The meeting is adjourned, again with great thanks to Ted Weinstein, who's my hero. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.